Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. I have been visiting Dubai for quite a number of years, usually once or twice a year. And a little over a year ago, I decided to formally get a residency in Dubai. So today, I'm going to discuss with you why I chose to move to Dubai, why I hadn't moved earlier, and give you some thoughts on whether it might be for you. So let's dive in. Before we do, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notification bell. Thank you for your support, and if you'd like help relocating abroad, getting residencies and citizenships, etc., please reach out to us. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer, link in the description below, or send a message to our websites, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so I'm going to talk first about the reasons that the reluctance I had around Dubai before kind of gradually having it grow on me and coming in. So I think I harbored a lot of the same misconceptions and prejudices the first time I visited Dubai that many people do. I remember calling a friend who was from Dubai and saying, hey, is it okay if my girlfriend who's going to be traveling with me wears whatever? And he's like, tell her to wear her sluttiest outfits. Like, don't worry about it at all. And so I had a lot of ideas about kind of the religious connotations and the restrictions and limitations on displays of public affection and, did you have to be careful with what you wore, etc. And mostly you find this is not true, but you especially find that it has increasingly eased up to the point where really it doesn't affect you at all. And, people are often shocked at what they experience given what they think they will experience on the religious side. Another thing that I found was when I first visited, they block voice over IP, which includes WhatsApp voice, Signal, Telegram, etc., Skype. And I thought, oh shoot, like a lot of my business takes place doing calls, so I'm going to be in trouble with this. Now, it turned out over time I kind of gradually realized, okay, you can get over that with VPNs, and then Zoom became popular and Zoom is not restricted, so you can kind of get around that. To this day, VPNs are kind of finicky, but Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, etc., no problems at all. So that helped out quite a bit. Then there's the question of cost, right? UAE is fairly expensive. Dubai in particular is fairly expensive. It's, depending on what you're comparing it to, I would say if you're living in, an expensive city for real estate, like say I was in downtown Vancouver or in San Francisco or London or something like that, that's not really expensive. But if you're thinking about things from the standpoint of being in Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia, then it's quite expensive. The rents can be, high, right? I would say to have in a good building, in a good location, a 2-bedroom place is going to run you anywhere from $2,000 to $6,000 US a month at this point in time. Again, depending on the quality of the building and stuff, you can find places that are cheaper, of course, but maybe the location isn't quite as good. So you have to kind of play around with what you consider. But the cost is definitely one of the factors. Food is way more expensive, both groceries and in restaurants. Although, to be fair, I was having lunch with a friend who had grown up in Dubai and now lives in Canada, but she was visiting. And we were talking, and she's like, look, you can go to Dara, you can go to different places where, you can get breakfast or lunch for $1. So definitely if you're willing to eat in certain ways, or if you're willing to live in certain ways, then you can live inexpensively. I guess for me, the whole point was that I'm like, okay, if you're coming to UAE, if you're coming to Dubai, the whole point is to benefit from that kind of lifestyle, not living another way. And so your cost of living is going to be quite a bit more expensive as compared to some other great places, okay? Now, this being said, another thing that it was concerning to me was the idea of how much am I there? So I felt this a lot when I lived in Canada. I felt this way when I lived in Serbia, in Bulgaria, a little bit different when I lived in Costa Rica, was that during certain seasons, I kind of felt the need to leave. It's like, it's getting to winter time, okay, I need to go. Now I have to figure out where I'm gonna go. This undermines my productivity because I'm not in my own workspace where I can be productive, etc. I'm changing locations quite a bit. If you're renting an Airbnb or staying in a hotel, the ergonomic setup isn't so good. And so I always disliked the idea of being in a place that I couldn't be there year round. So usually I'd go to Asia or previously go to Latin America, etc. But the idea was, okay, ideally I move to a place where I can be there all year round, and then I just choose when to go somewhere else. UAE is not this in the summer. Some people have misconceptions about the weather during the winter. They're like, oh, it must be hot. It's not hot. It's perfect. It's like 20 degrees. It's pretty much always t-shirt weather. So you can go outside and you're comfortable in a t-shirt pretty much the whole kind of winter period, right? So it's March now, January, February, that's pretty much my universal. Sometimes it gets cool enough that maybe you want to wear your blazer or something, in particular in the evening. But bottom line is, mostly it's nice. On the summer, it's the opposite. In the summer, it is unbearably hot. So it's so hot, I tell people during August, that they close Nikki Beach. Okay, so that's how hot it is. And you pretty much have to accept that if you're gonna spend the summer in UAE, you're basically just gonna be inside. Not the end of the world, right? You can be inside and that's all right, but also not really quite optimal. So definitely not what you want, but better than nothing, okay? So given those kind of negatives, what is it that ultimately made me decide that UAE is a great place? I generally think that Dubai is one of the best places for many, many people today, which is probably why you see a lot of people moving here, a lot of successful people in particular. And for me, I would say that over time, it was a city that grew on me. At first, some people will kind of say, oh, it's fake. Well, it's fake if you stay in like certain key tourist places, but there's many, many different options that are available to you that can give you a different experience. Likewise, one of the things I dislike about it, I still to this day kind of dislike about it, is the question of nature, right? You don't have a lot of nature. It's not necessarily a walkable place, but on the other hand, you can go to the mangroves in Ras Al Khaimah, and you can go paddleboarding and things like this, stuff that people have no idea even exists. Obviously, you can go out into the desert, and that's a whole experience. But you can also live in places like Al Barari, which is super green. When you see pictures of it, you're like, this is in Dubai, really? This is like an oasis. This is amazing. It's fantastic. And there's big parks, and you can walk for hours. And so there is these types of areas for people who are willing to go and explore and look for that sort of thing. So definitely some options available to you that maybe some people are not really aware of, and it's good to be able to be aware of those things and take advantage of them. Now, this being said, I think that the more time I spent in Dubai, the more I was like, actually, this is a great place. The quality of life is high. I mean, it is perhaps one of the most convenient cities in the world. There's very, very few places that compare. It's very 24 hours, meaning, it could be 3 in the morning and you can go and order all kinds of things, which is rare in most cities, right? Most cities you can't do that. During the daytime, I mean, if you want somebody to take a can of gas and fill up your car, they'll come to your place and do it. You want somebody to fix your computer, they'll come to your house, take the computer, diagnose it, and fix it and bring it back. You want to get maid service, you want to get dry cleaning, you want to get like pretty much whatever you want, you can get pretty much on demand via apps. And there's a lot of things that work really well in that regard. From a business and financial standpoint, I mean, zero tax. It's just really, really hard to compete with zero. It is, although it's pricey, it's not insanely pricey. It's also super well connected. One of the best connected cities in the world. You have Etihad, Emirates, Fly Dubai, like 3 fairly major airports, at least 2 major airports that give you a lot of connectivity and really good experiences in that regard. Now, to be fair, if you're talking about, say, going to Europe, you're talking about like, okay, the distance is quite a bit further than if you're already in Europe, right? So when I lived in Bulgaria primarily, I maintain residency in Bulgaria still, but if you're there, I mean, it's really accessible. You can get places in 2 hours or something. I'm flying to London tomorrow and it's an 8-hour flight, right? So that's pretty long. So it's nice as a bridge. If I want to go to Maldives, it's only a few hours. That's nice. If I want to go to Seychelles, it's close. That's nice. I'm closer to if I want to visit Kenya or Zanzibar or Mauritius or something like that versus coming from Europe. And then, of course, there's the whole Middle Eastern region. But, it is a bit of a hop to get to somewhere in Europe or somewhere in Asia. So as opposed to if you were already in Asia or already in Europe. So that tells you something a bit. A bunch of things are actually not so expensive. Once you start getting into it, you discover that electronics are a good price. Cost of help is clearly low price. Vehicles are not expensive. Fuel is not expensive. In general, transportation is not bad. It's not super cheap like you'll get in Egypt or Malaysia or Bulgaria or something like that, but it is pretty inexpensive compared to, London or, God forbid, like Oslo, Norway or something like that, or even major Canadian and American cities. So that tells you something as well. I found a lot of people really feel as though Dubai came into their own through 2020 and beyond, because when all these other places were closed, it was pretty much open pretty much the whole time just with mask mandates, and managed to do that while staying, sane and safe, and that was pretty great, right? So whereas a lot of places had all kinds of restrictions that people didn't like, it offered that. There's a plethora of great food and entertainment options, so you can go out to all sorts of fantastic places to eat food that there's just not really that many options in most places, okay? So yeah, if you're in Paris or you're, something like that, yes, okay, it's like a mecca of food, right? So it's not really comparable. But very, very few other places compared to the options. There's so many places that have nice decor, it's nice to go hang out. There's plenty of places that you can go down by the water. So there's lots of entertainment options, whether you want to go to cinemas, they have really great cinemas, you want to go to escape rooms or do Topgolf, or on and on and on. Lots of different things you can do. And that's pretty awesome. So I think for me, the tipping point was 2020, and originally I'd planned on locating myself as my main base in Asia, but Asia closed and wasn't really an option. So I was like, all right, well, what am I going to do? And so my wife really, really likes UAE, really likes Dubai. Interestingly for women, because a lot of people kind of have some idea that it's terrible for women or something, I can tell you she had described to me that she'd never felt safer as a woman anywhere than in UAE, which is interesting. So, that tells you a little bit about kind of her experience being out. I mean, it's a place that is safe for the most part. Okay, like you get crime anywhere, but certainly much lower, clean, that's good. Air pollution is a bit of an issue. You often see haze, etc., so that's something they have to work on. But I think the last thing for me, and perhaps the most important, given all these other things that are really good, is I think the government is actually one of the few really good governments in the world. And what I mean by this is they have a vision, they understand their weaknesses, they're working on improving them, and they execute. So you have things like they had Vision 2030 and Vision 2020. It's like, hang on, when I go to Canadian cities or American cities or European cities, what is their vision for 2020, 2030, 2040? I don't know, not really clear. And they set a goal, like, for example, they wanted to improve their passport. They wanted a top 5 passport within 5 years. And they went aggressively working on this. In 1 year, they improved their passport added 19 countries visa-free. Nobody does this. Not hardly anybody, nobody does this. Maybe they add like 2 or 3 in a year and they're doing well, right? 19 in a year. And in a very short time, they brought their passport to being extremely world-class. They have said that Vision 2040 is they want Dubai to be the best city in the world to live in. And, I kind of think, shouldn't that be the goal of every city? But apparently not. And they realized that one of their concerns is, people would like more greenery, et cetera. So they have a plan to make 70% of the city green space, which is amazing. If you think about kind of the feat that this is, doing that in the middle of the desert is really incredible. They realized that people were coming here very transitory. It was like a temporary place. You'd come to make money and you'd leave. So they decided they wanted to kind of encourage people to stay more. So they started to bring in more kind of permanent residency type options. They realized that we were seeing a transition in the types of workers there were. It was really well accommodating to investors or business owners and employees, but not to freelancers, et cetera. So they started bringing in freelancer visas and tech passes, green passes, things like this. They decided they wanted to be a leader in technology and blockchain, et cetera. So they set up a program to attract 100,000 tech workers to the area. They realized that the cost of food, et cetera, is an issue. So they decided to create Dubai Agri-City, where they're incubating all kinds of advanced agricultural technique and technology. Previous to that, Their people were always traveling abroad to get medical treatments. They decided to build Dubai Medical City and Medical City 2 and brought in, all sorts of that. So people from surrounding countries then started traveling to Dubai. Like one thing after another, they set their sights on it and they actually go and do it, and they do a great job of it. And are there issues? Yeah, of course there's issues. There's problems and it's not perfect, etc. There's little things to complain about. But I just ask, where else in the world are they doing something like that? Maybe Qatar, but Qatar is basically Dubai 10 years ago and is not quite what I would necessarily personally want. Obviously they're working aggressively on trying to do things in Saudi, but it's much more in a way that I'm not really so interested in. And so where do you go? They used to do it in Singapore. Singapore is still a great place, but it's difficult to get in. It's another thing about Dubai. It's really easy to come and live in Dubai. They make it, I think about, if somebody wants to go and live in the US or UK or Canada or one of these places, it's like a year plus multiple years long process to do it. In Dubai, you can have everything done in a month and off you go. That's great. And they have kind of this attitude of, listen, if you're coming here to add something to the system, then you're welcome. If you're not, goodbye. And I think that's sort of fair. So anyway, that's my perspective on the city, the country, etc. I think it's really, really extraordinary in the world today and makes for a place that has a really high quality of life. I don't think that if somebody's, on a budget or something, it's not the place for them. But if you're already making a decent amount of money, or you have a decent amount of wealth, or you're, looking to build, I think that's actually increasingly a good place to build. The networking is growing a lot because so many people are relocating to the space or to the area, and it makes it really good. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I would love to hear from you guys if you have personal experiences, any biases that you have against it, or maybe relocated to UAE and you have a perspective. Let me know, and I'm going to look forward to seeing you on the next video.